Hey guys, this video will look at why education spending is so important to increase our potential output in the long run. So as we know, education spending basically relates to the expenditure on education, schools, universities, and even subsidies to those who have financial difficulty sending their children to school. To those families with financial difficulty. So that's what the budget does, is that it outlays different sources of revenue in order to increase the number of schools, the quality of universities, and also subsidizes those families with financial difficulties so they don't need their children to enter the workforce straight away. They can enter university rather, attain a degree, a qualification, in order to gain a higher income. So we're going to break down aggregate supply again into two different parts. Firstly, we have the primary factors of production, and secondly, we have the secondary factors of production. We're going to use this as a basis of our analysis as to why education is so important in maintaining a long-term sustainable aggregate supply. So primary factors, as we should know by now, relate to land, labor, and capital. These are all tangible items. Secondary factors of production, however, are intangible, and this relates to the idea of efficiency, or the productivity of workers as to how they utilize their land, labor, and capital resources. So we're going to look at why the secondary factors of production are so important here, relating back to education spending. So many people might think education spending may relate to this labor resource, or this labor factor contributing to aggregate supply. However, there's a trick here, that education, although it relates to the workers, it doesn't actually relate to labor. I'm just going to put a cross there. It doesn't actually relate to labor, because labor relates to, or refers to, the number of people actually in the workforce. And that is a finite number. And so what you'll notice here is that our primary factors are all finite. We can only have so much arable land. We can only have so much people, or so many people, and we can only have so much capital or machines to work with. And although we can keep on increasing people, there is an upwards limit to how many people we can have sustainable in a country. And so how do we increase aggregate supply in the long term? We can't just keep on adding to our land resource, because we only have so much land in Australia. That's given to us by nature. We can't just keep on adding to people, because that's going to hinder other economic goals. And there is an upwards limit to how many people there can be in a country. And we can't just keep on adding to capital because of this concept that we have only so much land available. So we can't just keep on stockpiling on capital to improve our productivity, because as we know, the marginal product of capital is diminishing. Similarly, with the marginal product of labor, it is also known as diminishing. What this suggests is that the more people we employ, the product of the extra person we employ is less than the product of that last person. So take for an example, you have some people in an assembly line. The first person produces 5 units, say for example. The second person produces 4 units. And because they get crowded and more crowded, the fourth or the third person isn't even on the assembly line, and they produce 0 units. They're not even on this, and so they have to wait until these people finish, until they can produce something. So if this labor conditions get crowded, then having more people doesn't actually add to productivity. Same with capital. If we have another production line here, although it does add to production, we can see that we can't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because again, these working conditions get too crowded, and therefore that distracts from efficiency. And again, this building can't hold so much assembly lines, and so we can see that machines are also finite. We can only have so much machinery in an economy. But what isn't finite, what doesn't have an upwards limit, is this efficiency, or this idea of efficiency. And that's how education spending can help improve our aggregate supply side conditions. This person here, we come back to the same assembly line. This person here, previously producing 5 units, is now producing 10 units. And if they gain some more skill, they can produce 15, 20, 30. There is an endless, or there is not a limitless amount of how he can produce, or how much he can produce. If efficiency or if technology goes so far. So how does education improve efficiency? It is through skills. Take an unskilled worker, for example, and get them to, say, make a McDonald's burger, for example. This unskilled worker doesn't know how to make a McDonald's burger, and it takes him a long time to figure it out. But once he gets the hang of it, he can produce 5 McDonald's burgers in a minute. And that's because he's become more efficient and more skilled at that task. But that's a very simplistic example. But if you take that example or that analogy and apply it to, say, the financial industries, the mining industries, the manufacturing industries, retail industries, and all that, if we gain more skills through qualifications, then we can see that our efficiency in the long run will improve. So although land, labor, and capital are finite, there is no upwards limit to how efficient we can be in using our resources. So that's how education spending, or that's the idea behind education spending, is that the government, by encouraging people to study more, go to school, and instead of directly going into the workforce, it can improve aggregate supply side conditions in the long term. Although it may result in a decrease in the labor force, in the long run this is better for the economy because we are becoming a lot more efficient here. So that's the theory behind how education spending can improve our aggregate supply in the long run.